Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 11th, 2018, 6:38 a.m. All right, we are still at Category 4 status, 140 mile an hour sustained winds with Hurricane Florence. The chances of this becoming a Category 5 are rising basically every hour that goes by. We have pretty much many of the mainstream websites confirming that this thing could become a Category 5. We're going to base that on our data that we look at. We're not going to go by news articles, even though I am showing you this. I'm more showing you this because of the 1.5 million people that are being evacuated all the way from just south of Charleston, California, all the way up through the Outer Banks of North Carolina and even into Virginia in some cases, as we are expecting the landfall of Hurricane Florence to be a North Carolina landfall as of now. Still a little bit of wiggle room for that to change, maybe a South Carolina or a border of South and North Carolina landfall. But like I said yesterday, guys, if this thing hits anywhere in North Carolina, it will be the biggest hurricane to ever hit north of South Carolina, especially if this thing becomes a Category 5. If this thing jumps up to about 156 mile an hour winds, this is just going to be a very, very bad situation all the way, like I said, from Charleston all the way up through the Outer Banks. This will eventually affect many areas inside the Chesapeake Bay with floodwaters. We got to remember, guys, when this hurricane comes up into this area, it spins in a counterclockwise motion. And if I can kind of get you to picture that on this on Google Earth here. Here's Florence back here. Basically, picture Florence in this area. Now, I had this set up for a previous video, and I never took these down. But Hurricane Florence is going to be spinning in a direction like this, so you've got to understand it's going to be pulling water from the ocean and then pushing it into areas of the Outer Banks, or maybe a little bit more south if it's more of a southern hit. And then as it pulls out, it's actually going to pull water away from some of the beaches as it recycles itself and continues to spin. It's going to be a slow-moving storm, which is very unfortunate because the longer it sits, the more damage it's going to do, the more flooding it's going to do. And we're dealing with little islands like the Outer Banks, strip islands, and things of that nature. You cannot be anywhere near this place. That's why these mandatory evacuations have been put in place. Already 1.5 million people are leaving the area. We could see here that Hurricane Florence is at 944 millibars. That is a very low pressure and is still dropping. We have gusts of over 165 miles an hour, 140 mile an hour sustained winds, well within Category 4 range. Like I said, if we reach that Category 6, or Category 5 speeds, that would be 156 to 157, somewhere around that range. Now check out these rain rates, how they've changed. We're talking 10, 15. Some areas could get 20 plus inches of rain. That's counting the storm surge, which could be from anywhere from 10 to 12 feet. With a Category 5 storm surge is capable of reaching 18 feet, guys. So, again, these strip islands, these little in-gullies and things like that in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, they're going to be completely covered with water and for a significant period of time. And I agree very much with the mandatory evacuations for anyone that's either vacationing or living in this area. You need to be constantly on watch for this storm. You need to be listening to your local evacuation routes, what those CB radios, whatever it may be, as people in North Carolina and South Carolina have been clearly doing. They have been preparing for this storm for a few days now, as all the models have come together, and we are basically a set hit on North Carolina. Again, it is possible that could change into a little bit of a southern deal where we get a South Carolina and North Carolina strike. I don't see it coming up too far north to be a direct landfall in Virginia, but Virginia is close enough to that little area that sticks out of North Carolina that it certainly will be affected, and there will be water pushed into the Chesapeake Bay due to the size of this storm. I was watching some of the early news briefings this morning, and some of these air pilots are saying that actually drive through these storms and measure the pressure and give us our updates, say they've never seen like this intensification before, as far as this storm growing from basically being almost destroyed by shear winds to a strong Category 4 storm, basically within a 30-hour period. And you could see here, when you match the purple, we have hurricane watches all over the place. Basically, like I said, Charleston, California, moving all the way up through the Outer Banks, almost into Virginia. So don't be surprised to start seeing hurricane warnings and watches in the area near the Chesapeake Bay or southeast Virginia. I'm going to be back with another update absolutely as soon as I get off work today. I should be done around noon or 1 o'clock. But here we go. This is the main area of concern right now, is the entire basic east coast of North Carolina. And you could see here that even those deep reds extend down into South Carolina. So the state of emergency still remains for South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. I don't know if Georgia's going to join that. They may join it last minute, depending on how big this storm actually gets before it hits land. Guys, if this thing hits a Category 5 status, like, it's not just going to affect the one area that it strikes. It's going to affect everywhere from Georgia all the way up to Delaware. And then what happens after that is what's going to be important. So we're going to look really quick. Actually, this is actually those plane flight routes they take. You can't see the storm here, but they usually do like a crisscross deal, and it's like a box flight. And then they measure pressures, and then they relay the data back to us every so often. And with storms like this, you can guarantee they have many routes going on. And they're just constantly monitoring this, because this is going to be one of the biggest things to happen in the U.S. in a long time. We're talking Hurricane Harvey status. We're talking Hurricane Irma status, Maria status. And that is not an exaggeration, guys. I'm not trying to scare anybody here. This is a very, very serious situation. Anywhere north of South Carolina has never seen a storm like this. That is just flat out a true fact. There's never been a storm this big that is expected to make landfall north of South Carolina. So this is going to be a first for us, for many of us to see. We can see the hurricane watches are in effect. That's actually been already changed to hurricane warnings. And really quick, before I let you go, guys, we're going to run through each of these models just to show you that they are all beginning to agree on a North Carolina landfall Thursday into Friday. We could see here September 14th is when the European model expects this to hit land. We'll switch over to the GFS really quick, and you could see basically the same thing. This is Friday, just as the eye wall is beginning to, it looks like more of an Outer Banks landfall, so maybe a little bit north than the European model. But what's not good here is how it stalls out for 3 and 4 days, guys. This is going to be flooding that this area has probably never seen before, and I'm not exaggerating that either. The amount of water being brought with this storm is just unbelievable. Canadian model is showing also a northern Outer Banks landfall involving Virginia more. But again, the worry here is the storm staying put for even more than 24 hours is going to be just, it's not going to be good, guys. I don't want to use the word devastating anymore. I think I've said it enough. We all understand the seriousness of this storm. And we just need to be prepared for it, especially those people that need to be evacuated. You have to listen to this. You cannot stay in these areas if you are under mandatory evacuation. If you live anywhere near the coast, it is time to get ready to leave. You need to get west, and you need to go west as soon as possible, because once this thing hits, you will not be able to get out. And they won't be able to send rescue crews to help you either. They are not going to risk their own people to save those stubborn people that want to stay in these areas just because they think they're going to wait out a Category 4 to 5 storm. Basically, that's all I got for now, guys. Unfortunately, I have to get going for work, but I needed to update you on that. We have a potential and a possibility for this to strengthen to a Category 5 even through the day today. In the next 12 to 18 hours, we may see this thing hit Category 5 status, and it may weaken a tad before hitting land, but if it hits anywhere from 4 to 5, we can expect to be hearing about this, talking about this, studying it, and remembering it for one of the biggest events in U.S. history as far as weather goes. So with that said, guys, I hope everyone else has a good morning. It should be a fairly decent weekend in the Northeast, believe it or not, while this hurricane's actually hitting, but we'll talk about that in another video. All right, guys. Me and Caroline, we're thinking about all you guys that are going to be affected by this storm, and those of you that have to leave their homes, and just hope for the best. But you got to listen to the local radio and the local authorities. That's the only way to do it right. It's the only way to stay safe, keep your family safe. As far as supplies goes, I'm sure it's very known that people are buying a lot of supplies in the states, all the way from Charleston to the Outer Banks areas into Virginia. I don't need to explain much of that. All right, guys, have a great morning. I will be back around 1, 2, possibly 3 o'clock with an update. I hope everyone's safe. Take care. Have a great morning. Goodbye.